Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Azim Premji University. We are delighted to present today's program in our series of public lectures here in Bangalore. Public lectures are one of the ways by which the Azim Premji Foundation promotes its vision of a just, equitable, humane, and sustainable society. All our public lectures, about 95 of them so far, are available on our YouTube channel. I know many of you regularly attend our public lectures and you come here because you are invested in the education and development of our country and because you are well-wishers of Azim Premji University. So thank you all. A brief introduction to the speaker, the interlocutor, and the topic. Mr. Vinod Zutshi's CV was part of the invitation, so I will just pick a couple of highlights. He's a 1982 batch IAS officer and has extensive experience in election and democratic governance. As Deputy Election Commissioner for nearly 6 years, he conducted major elections, including the 2014 Parliament elections, the 2012 presidential and vice presidential elections, and numerous state assembly elections. He was previously the Chief Electoral Officer, Rajasthan. An election expert for Jordan, he participated in international election missions and chaired the Committee on NRI Voting. Our public lectures follow a format where we have the speaker deliver the talk and then one of my colleagues from the university engages the speaker in a short conversation. Today it will be Professor Sri Krishna Iyengar. Sri Krishna's teaching and research interests intersect political science and public policy. Before joining our university, Sri Krishna taught undergraduate students at liberal arts colleges, Sewanee and Hartford, and postgraduate students at New York University. His doctoral work was at the Maxwell School at Syracuse and was preceded by a master's at JNU. Sandhya has already covered what the lecture is going to be, and I'll skip that part and come straight to what the lecture may not be also. Mr. Zutshi is sure to lace today's talk with personal experiences, anecdotes if I may call them, covering all the points that Sandhya mentioned. However, there are at least 3 very hot topical issues in the public domain relating to the Election Commission. That is electoral bonds, one nation, one poll, and the integrity of EVMs. Mr. Zutshi will be open to respond to these during the conversation and Q&A and analyze them from his expert vantage point. However, you will appreciate that given the institutional responsibility he has held and the expectations from such office, he would like to refrain from any personal or political references. A bit about the program this evening. Soon after the introduction, Mr. Zutshi will deliver his talk, which probably includes a video, for about 50 minutes or thereabouts. Sri Krishna Iyengar will then be in conversation with him for about 20 minutes. And at the end, we expect to have around 15 minutes for audience questions. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Vinod Zutshi.
Good evening, friends. Mr. Sudesh, Mr. Sri Krishna, faculty and students of Azim Premji University, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am extremely delighted to be here this evening with all of you to speak on one of the most important aspects where India is a leader, the elections. And when we talk of Indian elections, we certainly feel proud of organizing such a mammoth event involving the entire people of this country with an electorate as many as nearing 100 crores and with actually 67 to 68 crores people turning up. Now, no wonder why India is a leader in electoral governance, and we are considered as a model in the entire world. Friends, I am going to run through this PowerPoint presentation, and do I have this? So my lecture over the next 50 minutes would be primarily discussing three aspects. The first is why elections of India are so important. How do we maintain the electoral integrity? Because that is something which is very important. Number two, who are the players who do it? Who are the stakeholders? And Election Commission being the main player, how are they able to organize such a big event, normally called as the largest festival of democracy? We are indeed the largest democracy also. But the quality with which we conduct elections is something which is unique. There are many countries who keep visiting India for other things as well, but for elections, they consider us as leaders. And thirdly, as was told by Ms. Sandhya, there are perceptions and misperceptions, there are misgivings, there are certain doubts in the minds of the people. Whenever there is a controversy, whenever there is an activity, whether there is a statement for someone, the people of India, and very naturally, they are supposed to find as to why this happens. And generally, since there is no mechanism and there is lack of awareness also, that results in those perceptions becoming doubts, and ultimately they become controversies. Elections, ladies and gentlemen, happens in a very surcharged atmosphere. So there are allegations, there are counter allegations. Election Commission's role is to be an umpire. And other stakeholders include the political parties, then the candidates, and of course the electorate. And not just electorate, the people in general. Even if they are not going to vote, they are not eligible to vote, but they have a lot of interest. So friends, I'll run through this presentation and try to cover these three areas. So let me talk about why Indian elections, it is a model. We are the largest democracy, but that doesn't mean if we don't do well, then the largest democracy will become a big liability. But it is not just the size and magnitude, it is also the electoral integrity. The unique features about Indian elections, we are taking democracy to the remotest. Imagine there are polling parties which are going to Gir forest with one voter. There are polling stations at 12,000 feet in the Himalayas, where the polling party of group of 4, 5, 6, along with the guards and everyone, they climb up to that 12,000 feet only to cater to a limited number of, at times they are lesser than the polling party. So this is our strength. We deal with diversities, all kinds of diversities I mentioned, and we have multiplicity of political parties. There are more than 1,000 political parties which have been registered. And the work of registration of political parties, ladies and gentlemen, is done by the Election Commission of India. But not every party. You must have also seen in the last elections, we never heard of 1,000 parties taking part. So they register, but they don't take part in elections. That is also an issue, which is an issue of reforms as to whether we need so many parties. But multiplicity of political parties is a strength of India. Because the more the parties, the more the democratic, structure. But the idea is that they should participate as well. And of course, as I mentioned, electoral integrity. Now, what exactly do we understand by electoral integrity? Friends, there has to be rule of law. It is not discretionary. Even Election Commission doesn't have the discretion of many things. I will go through all those areas. We are governed by legal provisions, and beginning with the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India mentions about, in Article 324, how and who will conduct elections. And it's been further clarified as to what are the responsibilities. In fact, it goes to the extent the Election Commission of India is so powerful through the Article 324 that the election machinery, the poll personnel, they are derived from the government people, the government servants. And Article 324 mentions that the President of India will provide manpower to conduct elections in the center, and the state governor will provide the necessary assistance to the Election Commission to provide manpower. Because Election Commission as a whole just have about 500 people in their secretariat. So this is both a strength as well as the rule of law is important. Then there are statutory acts, ladies and gentlemen, Representation of People's Act 1950, 1951, Conduct of Election Rules, and then Electoral Registration Rules, and a few more. These are the acts which govern even the process of nomination. It is prescribed how many days for nomination, when should scrutiny happen, when should withdrawal happen, how many days have to be given for the campaigning by the political parties. It's all given in the acts. So the discretion has been limited, and that is the strength of Indian elections, that it has the electoral integrity. Nobody can tinker with these laws because law is supreme. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, anything which is not covered in any of these laws, they are interpreted by Election Commission. They give instructions, small, big instructions, whatever has not been mentioned. Coming to Election Commission, as to how important Election Commission is for India, can you imagine the wisdom of our constitution makers, that before the constitution came into existence on 26 January 1950, before India became republic, Election Commission of India was constituted one day before. The thought was, how can there be a republic without an election management body? So that is one. Election Commission, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, they are very autonomous. There are certain things which needs further reforms, for which Election Commission has been seeking these reforms from the Law Ministry and from the government. Lately, Supreme Court in its 2023 judgment has also given some additional autonomic powers to the Election Commission, which is going to help them to conduct elections in a better manner. As I mentioned, the Commission doesn't just get its powers from the Article 324 or other articles of Indian Constitution. There are many landmark court judgments. As I mentioned, in 2023, there are at least a dozen such judgments, ladies and gentlemen, for Supreme Court, which has helped the Commission to conduct elections. They have empowered the Election Commission. And of course, as I had mentioned, the ECI organization is very small. I have worked there for 6 years. There are 3 members, the Election Commission. There are 3 or 4 deputy election commissioners. And then you have a secretariat comprising about 400, 450 people. I won't go into the details of election machinery because that is not the subject. So coming to electoral integrity further, so we have an election machinery which is under full control, administrative control of the moment the elections are announced. All poll personnel, including the district magistrates, the SPs, everyone comes under the fold of the Commission. They can take disciplinary action against them. And that is how they are empowered. Because all said and done, elections are human-driven, events. Only machines can't conduct elections. So the human quality has to be so good that they have to be credible and they have to be qualitative. So we have a big setup and big, I would say, infrastructure for supervisions and control at various levels. We have observers and micro-observers. We have the chief electoral officer in a state. CEO of Karnataka. Karnataka has a chief electoral officer who is basically a representative of the Election Commission. Then at the district level, the district magistrates assume the role of district election officer. Then at the subdivision, we have the EROs, electoral registration officers. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, very, very important to India elections, which you will not find anywhere in the world, we have booth level officers. This was started sometime in 2009 10, when I was also there. And what BLOs do, there is one booth level officer for every booth in this country. So if there are 10 lakh booths today with which we conducted elections of 2024, there are 10 lakh BLOs throughout the country. And who are they? They are village level officers. They may be panchayat secretaries, they may be teachers, they may be patwaris, and likewise. Role management. Now, without a good role, without a healthy electoral role, no election can be called as a good election. So the commission tries to make the role as healthy as possible. And what do you mean by healthy role? No one should be left out. And those who are not eligible should be deleted. Now, these are the issues which I would flag later on, that these are issues which are raised by political parties and even people, that my name is not there. Now, one thing, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to mention and clarify, that there is no law which says that the Election Commission can go to any person and include his name. That can be disastrous. The person has to fill up Form 6 and he has to sign it. So without his consent, no voter can become a voter. So that is something which is a big challenge before the Election Commission. And most of the promotional activities which Commission does in the name of SWEEP, S-W-E-E-P, is to persuade youngsters. Suppose the moment somebody turns 18, the SWEEP activities start focusing on the youngsters. Oh, now you're 18. Please fill Form 6. Even the BLOs go and contact the households that your son has become 18 years old, he's eligible, why don't you ask him to fill the form? Now, this is the kind of proactive action which is being taken at the commission level. So friends, then followed by, you have to have an identity document. So EPIC cards, the voter ID card as you call. If that is not there on the poll day, the commission allows 10, 12 more identity documents. But this will be a perfect document to go with. And of course, the polling stations for the remotest. Within 2 kilometers, every person has a polling station. Friends, electronic voting machine, Mr. Sudesh also mentioned about it. There are lots of misgivings. I will not discuss it here, but later on, in my third part, I would take up this issue and will take up any question that you have. Let me tell you today, at this particular moment, that India's electronic voting machine, mind you, India's electronic voting machine is a very robust equipment. It is totally reliable. It is not connected to the internet. In crude terms, you can say it's a calculator. You keep pressing and it keeps adding. As far as controversy is concerned, it's been happening for the last almost 15 years. And even the foreign agencies have not been behind or to raise these controversies. Mr. Elon Musk has been the latest to enter this particular arena. I will tell what all is the truth. So, but however, it is the fastest mode of polling and counting. Imagine for a country like India, you start the counting at 8 o'clock and by the evening you have all the counting done. And nobody has any problems. Whatever rhetorics you listen during the election process, when the voting has not been done, those are all settled the moment results are declared, which means that all is well. Friends, training is very important. Since I mentioned human being is driving these elections. So we need to have not just a good quality of poll personnel, but also we must have good training. There are many levels of training which is given. And hands-on training on EVM. Now we have another VVPAT, which is a mechanical device where the training is given. And in order to conduct elections in a free and fair manner, ladies and gentlemen, there is one major issue which is seen in, if not all areas, in some parts of the country, that is intimidation. There are elements which stop the voters to vote from going to the polling station. So vulnerability mapping is within a constituency, these are the vulnerable areas, these are the vulnerable sections. And the protocol of the Election Commission is that the sector magistrates, you are supposed to meet those people who seem to be vulnerable. And it is your responsibility to see that they come to the polling station without any fear. So this is known as verb, and this has also been introduced for the last 10 years. And of course, security and safety of polling parties and the voters, that's equally important. Now, continuing with electoral integrity, the model code of conduct, you may have heard so much about model code of conduct. Now, this is a very unique, I won't say it's a law, it's a code. At times there are questions, why can't you make it as a law? It can be more effective. The answer of the Election Commission generally is no. Why? Because model code of conduct is a code which has been prepared by the political parties with consensus, and they have accepted it. So anyone who has made a so-called law, with his own consent, will certainly follow it more. Number two, when you have model code of conduct violations, the action is faster. If you have, in terms of law, then you know the process of law. You are referred to some other criminal law act or whatever, and that takes a lot of time. By that time, those 14 days of election campaigning is over. So, friends, model code of conduct is very unique. It's not that we see whether the model code of conduct is violated by the people in the fray, the candidates. We also monitor the expenditure. Friends, there is a limit of expenditure, 95 lakhs for the parliamentary constituency, in some it is 75, and in assembly it is 40 lakhs. No candidate can spend more than this. And who keeps this account? Election expenditure observers, who are Indian Revenue Service officers of very senior level. Alongside, the candidate is supposed to file his own accounts and submit to the returning officer. But in case, this is the power of expenditure monitoring. The law says, Section 10A of Representation of People's Act, that if the expenditure recorded by the election expenditure observer is found to be correct by the Election Commission, then that particular candidate, even if he has been elected, he will be disqualified. So this is the power of monitoring the expenditure. Muscle power, as I mentioned, is nothing but preventing intimidation. Mechanism for money power. Now, friends, money power of late has not been declining. I would say that this is a big challenge for the Commission. You must be hearing lots of seizures of cash, during the election process. That was started when these kinds of things had started happening. There are also allegations of bribing the voters. So this is one area which still remains as a big challenge. And of course, lately the use of technology. I won't go into the various aspects of technology which have been put into practice by the Election Commission, but they are huge. Today, anyone sitting here can find his name in the electoral roll by searching the National Voters Portal. 10 years, 15 years ago, you had to go to the ERO's office and say, sir, can I find out whether my name is there or not? So this is the kind of technology has been adopted in full swing by and of course, transparency and credibility are the two strong pillars for election management in our elections. EVMs. It is not just that EVMs are brought and put in the polling stations. There are many level checks of EVM. And mind you, before the EVM is finally closed for conducting elections, they are displayed before the political parties. Please come, all of you. We are setting the EVMs, and we are now sort of mending it. We are checking the battery and all, but please come. And then on the control unit and ballot unit, we tie a Nasik printing press made seal, which is wound on both ballot units and control units. And the political parties are made to sign. Nobody can ever open it. If somebody tries to open it, the seal will break. Now, this is a kind of transparency methods. Then parties and candidates, randomization of EVMs. It is not that EVM, take this EVM to that particular polling station. No. The district magistrate in his constituency has 1,000 EVMs with him in his storage. After he has prepared those EVMs, the observer of the commission from Delhi will come and, all right, you randomize. Which will go to, which polling station will get number 1, which will get 100, nobody knows. Even the RO doesn't know, the observer also doesn't know, and the political party candidates do not know. But once the list is finalized, the EVM numbers are given to each and every candidate so that he can keep a track. That if EVM number 5 had to go to polling station 25, then he can check at polling station number 25 whether the EVM 5 number is there or not. This is the kind of transparency and randomization. Similarly for poll personnel. Friends, it's not that, okay, send me to this polling station, but I am very close to this place. So familiarization breeds contempt. That aspect has been very well addressed. So we randomize the poll personnel. There are sets of presiding officers list, polling officer 1, 2, and then they are all randomized. 1 goes with 5, 2 goes with 6, and likewise. And they don't come to know which polling station they are going to till the time they go in the morning to take their election poll material and to go to the polling station on the day before the poll day. So if you ask a day before the poll personnel, oh, which polling station are you going? I have no idea. I'll come to know tomorrow. So that people don't collude with them. All right, are you coming to that polling station? It's my constituency. Okay, so please, dhyan rakhna. He says, no, I don't know where I'm going. This is the kind of checks and balances. Then we have the SMS poll, based poll monitoring. Now, a lot of controversies came up this time. What is the percentage of polls? Nobody is disclosing. Now, this SMS-based poll monitoring, every presiding officer is sending through his mobile within 2 hours so much poll, 4 hours. But ultimate, the compilation is done at a later stage. When the presiding officers, the 17C is produced and they see the number of, he fills up the form and then finally it is compiled. So it is not that tomorrow in the morning you have the election, in the evening you can project the entire exact number of electors who have voted. It takes time. Even if you see that today, the overall percentage of poll which has happened in the entire country is still tentative. It is not officially published because it takes time and we have such a big country. Friends, I would like to focus one point about live webcasting and videography. Now, what is live webcasting? Today, whatever is happening in a polling station can be seen live in real time. And election commission sitting in their office, they have those video walls. The chief electoral officer sitting in Karnataka has his video walls, and he can put all the polling stations in one video wall, and maybe we can keep changing. So he's watching what is happening in polling station 1, 2, 3, 4, the entire state, the entire country can be seen polling in real time. Somebody has entered, somebody has gone out, everything is visible. It's like CCTV, which can be seen from a distance. This is again a game changer in bringing transparency and deterrence. Deterrence for people who indulge in booth capturing, who can do some, violent activity or maybe try to vitiate the poll in the polling station. And the next point which endorses our electoral integrity, ladies and gentlemen, is the electoral justice. Another unique provision in the Constitution of India. No courts can interfere till the election process is over. Otherwise, you may have a situation in which somebody goes immediately after nomination is rejected, he goes to the court, sir, give us stay. That way it is so difficult to have elections. So Constitution itself has made this provision. But once the results have been declared, then high courts, election petitions can be filed. So there is a remedy after that as well. And of course, Supreme Court interprets the laws, and as I had mentioned, they have come out with landmark judgments. Coming to the second part, ladies and gentlemen, the organization of our elections. Let me give you just few facts. You don't have to go through the figures, but we have 543 constituencies and 97 crores or 968 million voters. And then we have different sections. I mean, it is so inclusive. We have the third gender as voters. We have a list of senior citizens. We have list of those who are plus 85 plus. We have a list of those who are 100 plus. And similarly for service elector voters. Now, this kind of classification helps in making strategies. And one such strategy is, I would talk about those who are above 85, is that they don't have to go to the polling station. They can cast their vote in the form of postal ballot certificate within their home. In fact, the polling personnel, they come to his house and make a makeshift polling station and request him, sir, please vote. Now, this is the kind of facility primarily to see that they are more inclusive, nobody is left out, and number two, to see that more and more participation happens. Friends, let's begin with the kind of the mammoth exercise that Election Commission does. So start with pre-poll planning. Now, Commission doesn't have the discretion to hold election anytime. So the Constitution and the law says that 6 months before the expiry of that particular assembly or parliament, the Commission can hold elections. Now, take for instance, the present parliament, Lok Sabha, would have ended on 16th of June. So 16th December 23 to 16 June 24, Commission has got the constitutional responsibility to conduct elections within this span. But generally the elections are held towards later part, so that why should you cut short the duration of any government and start in December itself? So generally the Commission doesn't do it, but law has given them the powers. Conducive and enabling conditions for conduct. Now, this is very important. I am reminded of both in terms of law and order and natural disasters. I'll give you two examples. In 2014, it so happened that Jammu and Kashmir were due for elections, assembly elections. And there was a huge flood in Srinagar and around. Now, the situation was such whether we would be able to conduct elections with that situation. So the question came before Election Commission and the time was running out. So I was sent to Jammu and Kashmir and to find out whether floods would affect the elections. I met all the parties. Some of the parties said, oh, don't hold elections. Most of the parties said, no, so we should hold elections. Finally, I gave the report to the Election Commission and it was decided. Same thing was in case of Bengal on law and order. There was a situation before the elections that the Commission thought that there is so much of violence, so much of disorder, that elections may not be, it will not be worthwhile to hold a good election there. So we made a team of chief electoral officers and some senior police officers. They went to West Bengal and they came back and suggested, sir, if we put 200, 300 Central Armed Police Force companies, things can improve. We did that from the Election Commission. And within 20 days, the situation was good to enable us to conduct elections. So these are just two small examples to explain how the Commission has to work. Now, coming to prerequisites, you can't hold elections just like that. You need an updated photo electoral roll. You need voter identity documents, as many as you can. You need polling stations which have been physically verified. You need a human resource and entire database of poll personnel, of officers, of election expenditure teams, of observers. Then you need all the EVMs and VVPAT. There was a time before 2019 elections, ladies and gentlemen, in which Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court had desired that in fact, Election Commission gave this commitment that 2019 elections will have 100% VVPAT, because that was a later inclusion. And Commission did not have that many VVPAT. With the result that the Commission demanded lots of EVPATs, which were costing a huge amount. So they got the permission from the government, money also, and finally they were working overnight to produce VVPATs, and finally they were. So this is also a prerequisite. Not that if there are no VVPATs, elections would not have been held, but this is an important condition to conduct elections. Then ballot papers, polling material, vehicles, live webcasting, videography, and also money. So that is why I said man, machine, material, money. All these four things have to be there in order to begin the election process. So friends, election budget. In assembly elections, the state government makes provision in the budget. In parliament elections, the government of India and state, both of them make provisions. And money has never been a problem. Friends, the next process is interactions of election commission with various people. Now this is basically to find what should be the election schedule. So they discuss with political parties. They go to state government, state of the country. They discuss with the chief secretary, the parties of that state. They discuss with the collectors. They discuss with the police officials. They also have meetings with media and take their briefing. Then they meet the Union Home Secretary for the forces, whether how many forces would you be able to give. And of course, they also discuss and maybe write to the CBSE, to other boards, to the meteorological department for the weather conditions, to Indian Railways for transportation of forces and so many things, and many more departments in order to come to a schedule. So planning of poll schedule, again, as I had mentioned earlier, is mentioned. A lot of things are mentioned in the law itself, in the RP Act. First thing is that law and order holds a very important aspect. So generally, you must be finding that when we conduct Lok Sabha elections, we have 7 phases. At times, it was 8 or 9 phases. So somebody will wonder, when you have a district magistrate in a constituency, when you have the local people, local poll personnel, nobody goes from one state or one district to the other. Why can't we conduct elections in one go? That's because, ladies and gentlemen, the forces are limited. The Central Armed Police Force, depending upon the availability of CAPF, the plan is made that, all right, they will hold elections in this part of the state. Then they will move on to UP, then they will move on to Bihar, then they'll move on to West Bengal, then they will come down. This is how. And that is why, and within those 7 phases, they move from one. The kitty is the same, but they are used at least 7 times, as you can explain this way. So weather conditions, harvest seasons, then educational calendar, issues raised by political parties, and of course, days of the week. Why I'm mentioning days of the week is because there are certain activities within the polling process which cannot be held on a holiday. For example, scrutiny has to be a working day, but polling can be done on a Sunday. So that also has to be followed. This is all laid out. Announcement. Once the poll schedule, it's a very secret document, ladies and gentlemen. I had the privilege of planning for 2014 elections, and we had to keep it a secret in the sense that our office was locked. We had to lock our people so that they are not able to communicate with the world to leak out the poll schedule. And finally, the next day, the live press conference. So the whole nation comes to know in one go when are the polls going to happen. And this has been continuing for quite some time. Now, once the announcement has been done, the model code comes into operation. And then we have the formal notification, the legal notification from where the nomination starts. The nomination, as I mentioned, it's a full process, scrutiny, withdrawal, list of candidates, and the campaign period of minimum 14 days. It can be more than 40 days also, but the law says that it has to be minimum 14 days. Then there is a concept of silent period. Now, what is the silent period? The silent period is 48 hours before the end of the poll on the poll day. Suppose if today is 24 June and 5 o'clock the poll ends. So on 22nd of June at 5 p.m., the poll campaigning will stop. And these 48 hours are, now these 48 hours are so important because this is the time when lots of malpractices are done. Whether intimidation, whether money, bribing and all. So the commission keeps a very, very close watch. And another thing which has been banned by the law is you cannot give an opinion poll. Number 2, you cannot campaign. There may be some complaints of, oh, somebody is still campaigning. So the MCC teams, they run and find out, and then they take care of such complaints. So this is also very important. Coming to the poll day. The poll day is full of activities. And what are those activities? Complaints, grievances, media making news about malfunctioning of EVMs. Some are correct, some are wrong. news about alleged booth capturings, news about some malpractices happening, news about clashes in some places, but of course, largely the news is that everything is going on peacefully. So the election machinery is busy in maintaining the law and order, attending to the complaints and redressal, handling the press and media reports. I generally give an example to explain. I was in charge of Bihar elections. So in one elections, while the poll was going on, I was keep my, all the channels open. So I watched that there is a news coming, bomb blast in Patna, near the polling station. Now, when I checked up from the DGP and the local district magistrate, I asked them to go and find out. They said that there were some firecrackers, and the media had misreported or maybe under ignorance. Now, the immediate thought was that if there is a news running, scrolls, bomb blast, who would go and for the vote, to give the vote? Everyone will be scared. So I said, no, you first go find out the facts, and then you give another news from your side, that our sources say that it was not a bomb, it was just a firecracker, somebody had played by mischief. Now this is how, within those 8, 9 of 10 hours of poll day, you have to attend to such informations. So friends, there are some poll vitiations also. There are cases of booth capturing, there are cases of bogus voting also on the poll day, but they are so few, and gradually they are reducing because the transparency has come so much. We have live webcasting. If somebody does something, he will be caught. That is for sure. And in that case, if poll vitiation has happened, repoll is mandatory. It has to happen. And once the repoll is done, what is the point in some miscreant creating these malpractices? Because ultimately he will not gain from it. He will get a FIR against his name, that is one, and the polls will again happen. So people have started realizing, and this acts as a deterrent to these people. Friends, after the EVMs are polled, then taking it to the central storage room is also a challenge. There are many complaints which keep coming. So when the EVM would be taken from the polling station to the storage, something can happen, you may change it or maybe replace it. All right, political party and candidates, if you want, you join the carcade in which the EVMs are going. Then when the storage is done, so something may happen, the counting will happen 1 month later. Who knows that something will happen inside, somebody will change the EVMs and replace it. All right, first of all, you sign outside the door, when it is sealed. And number 2, if you have that doubt, you pitch up a tent right in front of the door where the storage has been done, and stay here for 10, 15, 20 days, whatever number of days you want to be, day and night. Ladies and gentlemen, there were parties who sat, but gradually it has been, it is reducing because people have developed more and more faith. Counting day process also raises certain issues. I will raise those issues later on when I come to. And finally, friends, the result declaration by the returning officer and notification is issued by the Election Commission, which notifies that 543 members who have been elected to the Lok Sabha under these elections are like this. And this notification copy in the list is submitted to the Honorable President of India. This is what you must have also seen. Now, coming to the issues. Friends, how these perceptions rise and how they are addressed. The main players are these who raise the issues. There may be some more. You have political parties and representatives making, rhetorics and making allegations. You may have candidates who may raise objections. You may have media and press who may give provocative things, and maybe news also, which half truth or half may not be truth. And then, of course, the voters also have some issues. Civil society and people at large, they are also a force to raise complaints and grievances. And of course, today, foreign media has also started, acting very proactively. Now, coming to these broad areas, friends, this will address the issue as to what kind of issues come. Now, first is voter list related. Now, voter list related issues are, friends, like a candidate will say, oh, lots of names have been deleted in my area. Voter may say that my name has not been included, my name has been deleted. Then political parties may say that, there are a lot of duplicate voters. I remember on the voter list thing, I'll give an example. I was, in 2019, I was asked by Election Commission, I keep working for them still, to, as a special observer, you go and to the Andhra Pradesh. There were complaints from the opposition party that a lot of duplicate voters are happening. Now, what does duplicate voters, maybe I will not dwell on that, but which means that there are two names, all over the, so there is a system of running the software and finding out. So I was sent to Andhra Pradesh. I was there for about 4 or 5 days, and we found out what are the duplicate names. Now, those duplicate names come because of the error made by the voter themselves, because they shift from one place to the other, but they don't get their names deleted. So we went there. So these are the issues which were raised by political parties, that there are so many duplicate voters, and that they assign a motive also, that this has been done in connivance with this, in order to make it more important. And so coming to the ID card, the only thing that can come is, my ID card has not been made, how would I vote? So these are the issues. So as I had mentioned, there are 14 ID cards which can be brought, to the polling station for identification. Voter ID card is not legally mandatory. If you don't have EPIC card, you will not be refused to vote. Friends, electronic voting machine and VVP related. Now, this is one issue which so Sudhesh had also raised, and very pertinent. I did make a statement that all is well. Now, what is one of the things that happened, in fact, it started as early as 2009. Now, when I was in the Election Commission, and the Commission, did their best to dispel this perception. Now, there was a gentleman who showed on some TV that how the EVMs can be tempered. And he showed that a Bluetooth is placed inside the polling, in the EVM ballot, the control unit, and then you can give command and this, that. Now, after he made these allegations, the commission, took him one-on-one. He said, all right, Mr. So-and-so, you please come to the Election Commission and you prove it. So the entire program, as if there's a contest happening, he was made to, the EVM was, placed in front of him. Commission said, all right, now you do it. So naturally he said, sir, I'm not a magician or a PC Sarkar that I will do it, by, just through a magical wand. I need to take it home. And I have to put Bluetooth in it. And I'll bring it again after 2-3 days. And then maybe I can show it. So then we said that it is not the Election Commission's EVM. It becomes your EVM. So friends, after this Bluetooth thing, the point that I mentioned, even then, in order to dispel, because you cannot explain to each and every person in this country that what that gentleman said is correct or what commission said is correct. So we started tying this seal so that nobody can ever think of even putting a Bluetooth. After that, this kind of, all these allegations, they came to rest. So these are the kinds of activities or complaints which keep. Now for VVPAT, it was brought again because of this. Oh, there's a glow sign, but we are not sure whether it's, you press on one and it goes to some other. It's all wrong, because it's a program machine which has been done at the time of making the EVM. There is no internet. It's just a calculator in which you keep pressing, and there is no scope. And finally, in VVPAT, when we brought VVPAT basically to endorse this point that nothing is wrong with EVM, because once they see the paper slip coming out and with name and all, the people were satisfied. So now today, ladies and gentlemen, barring few sporadic allegations here and there, and you must have also seen that all these allegations or doubts about EVM are raised when the election process is on. Once the results have come, nobody has raised this issue. So my basic point is that it is non-temperable. Even VVP related issue was raised in the Honorable Supreme Court. Some parties, even this election, they said we should count 100% slips. Now slips don't come in your hand, they go down. That was deliberate. So they said ki all those slips should be counted. So if slips were counted, then it become again the same ballot paper regime. So that is not done, and Supreme Court also endorsed this decision of coming to election phase, campaign phase, model code of conduct violations. Now there are allegations that ruling party is still misusing its money. They are using their vehicles. They are using the beacon light. Now there are no beacon light, but earlier they used to be. Then somebody has inaugurated when he cannot. Policy decision, and so on and so forth. There was a case in one of the state elections where one minister kept on clearing files even after the model code of conduct was imposed. Now friends, the good thing about model code of conduct is that there are so many watchers. You know, press and media is one. Nothing can remain hidden. So we got a call from the press and media ki sir, one minister is sitting in the secretariat and he is still signing. If not media, then opposition will call. And then we actually found that this was true. So the commission decided, all right, keep those files aside. We will see that those files, decisions on those files are not honored and kept in abeyance. Now this is the kind of model code of conduct violations. Then you have those campaigning, you know, small, big. You use 10 flags, somebody use 1 flag. You know, the size is bigger, the size is smaller. So all these things. There's another thing which happens. There's a helicopter landing. You gave preference to X and not to Y. You gave preference to the ruling party leader and not to the opposition party leader. So the fact is that there is a roster for helicopter landing. There are times, many times it has happened that somebody was not allowed to land. That was an allegation. Now that also, I had been DMSP, I have been the district magistrate. When I conducted elections in Jaipur district, we were given the responsibility that if something happens to the VIP during elections while landing, because we decide whether he can land here or here. The safety and security is the responsibility of DM. You can't, you know, have problems in somebody's safety and security and make him land just because you want to be in the clear that you did not refuse to the opposition, to the ruling party leader. So that way, friends, election expenditure issues, as I had mentioned, that in case there is an anomaly between that there are complaints. Sir, he's spending so much money and he's shown only this much of account. So everything is accounted. Paid news. You may have heard of paid news, but it's a big menace. The people in the fray, they spend money and get the news on their favor, just to, you know, motivate the voters and to give that impression that, you know, we are doing a good job. And of course, law and order clashes, these things happen. Security of candidates is another issue. You know, in those places, especially J&K and many other places where there is a fear of any violence or any attack on the candidates while they campaign, the police takes cognizance of whether they are Z plus, Y, X, whatever, and they give security guards to them. So at times, you have given guard to him and not to him. So these are the issues which come from their side, and generally, the people in general, they are not. Money power misuse, I have already mentioned. Complaints that somebody is bribing. They are still in the 48 hours, they are in the silent period, but they are canvassing. Intimidation, and of course, silence period of no opinion polls. At times, even the opinion polls are banned during that 48 hours, but you will find somebody giving a TV interview, you know, in the media. Somebody will complain. Now, these are the issues which Commission is, you know, always working with their election officials in the district and other. Poll day related, as I had mentioned, poll violations, booth capturing, EVM malfunctioning. In fact, it's a fact that EVMs do malfunction when they begin, but the percentage is minuscule, just about 0.05%. And immediately with 30 to 40 minutes, those EVMs are replaced. So it doesn't affect the polling process. Unless something happens, then another machine comes, and if the polls voted in the machine number 1 and machine number 2, both machines will go to the counting center. This is how it happens. Then media and press keeps election machinery active with fake news as well as real news. Now, Commission cannot discriminate at the face value whether it's a fake news or. So for every news, you have to check Somebody has to go on the spot and see whether it is correct or not. And of course, preventing from voting percentage figures I have already mentioned, and bogus votes, they do happen. But there is a system. It is possible that somebody in the name of Vinod Zucchi may hoodwink the polling party there and may cast vote against my name. And then after an hour, the real Vinod Zucchi comes. So I will find, no sir, you have already voted. No, it was a bogus vote. What do? So you put a tender vote. So another vote of the real Vinod Zucchi will be taken by the polling party and they will be put in an envelope. So in case it is required, then the tendered vote will be put to use. How votes are so important. They say that even one vote matters. I will tell you a story about Rajasthan elections of 2008, when a candidate who was expected to become the chief minister of the state lost by one vote. He got the recounting done. But recounting an EVM is what? You press the button, the same result will come. The postal ballots may differ, in counting because they are manually done. But there was no difference. Now, when there was no difference, it means, what does it mean? It shows how perfect the election commission system is. That is one. And number two, even in the voter slips, the Supreme Court has said, you count 5 slips of every assembly constituency. In the last elections of 2019, they had to count all the voter slips 5%. Suppose if there are 100 voters, 5 slips will be counted and, they will be. Now, they found that there is not a single difference in the polled EVM figures and the sample of those VVPAT slips. Friends, safe transportation, I have already mentioned, there are issues. I have also mentioned how they are addressed, safety and security. And repoll earlier used to be a taboo for the election officials. Oh, repoll is happening, that means your elections are not good. The Election Commission's policy has been lately, all right, don't let lawlessness have a premium. If somebody has adopted lawlessness means, you must punish him by conducting a repoll, which I explained to you earlier. Counting process. One thing which is very important about counting process issues that come up is lead and trail controversy. Now the counting is happening, first round, second round, the results are sent outside. Now in one particular round, you may have A winning and suddenly he starts losing. So he starts complaining, oh, how can I lose? Somebody who's losing, and the press and the media, they also publicize trailing by so many votes. Suddenly after 10, 15, 20 minutes, when the second round happens, oh, he is leading. People raise doubts. How can the results be overturned? How can the trailing person become a winning candidate? So these are issues which happen within the commission, within the counting centers also. There are also cases, friends, where EVMs, they don't display results. So what happens is, the moment it is found that EVM is not showing result, it is kept aside with the knowledge of the counting agents of the parties and the candidates. And it is not opened till the counting is complete. When the counting is complete, then they see who is the winner and with how much lead he's won. If the lead of the winner is much, much more than the votes which are present in EVM, then it is not counted at all. But if we find that this malfunctioning EVM has 400 votes and the margin of difference of victory is about 200, then the EVM experts will come. We have mechanism to open and get a printout. Then it will be taken. So this is also an issue which I thought I would flag before you. And of course, last but not the least, a lot of delays happening in result declaration. So many constituencies have declared. So the RO is into something. He is trying to maybe make somebody else win because he is holding back the results. It is not true. Because when somebody asks for recounting, he has to take a decision and things take time. Nothing is done hurriedly during election process. Friends, I would sum up by reiterating once again that Indian elections are very participative. You see the kind of festivity that one has. You go in Rajasthan, I belong to Rajasthan cadre. They go and truckloads and they go in tractors with all good, they dress up very well to the polling station. The women in colorful dresses, they go. It's like a festival. It's very participative. You can't see this anywhere in the world. And despite minor issues and perceptions about which I discussed with you, Indian elections are perceived to be highly credible. In fact, the American leaders had called India's elections as a gold standard election. And you have seen what has been happening in the elections in US, even UK in the previous 2 elections, something. So, and the best thing is, as I had mentioned, after the results are declared, there are no issues. If there is a shift of power, if there is a transition of power, it is peaceful and smooth. No other country you will find that the outgoing chief minister or outgoing prime minister will ever, have any problem. They will invite, please come and take this seat. This is the strength of our democracy, because Indian elections are not just good elections. Indian elections are not just professional. Indian elections are not just managed very effectively. Indian elections are also highly credible. People believe. And I remember one very tall leader of Bihar. We were sitting in the election commission and this gentleman came inside after the results were declared and he had lost. He said, sir, I may have lost, but I've come here to compliment the election commission that your elections were most credible. We believe that whatever has come out is truth and nothing else. And finally, with every election in India, friends, we are strengthening our democracy. That is our strength. And that is why India is a leader. That is why India is a model in electoral governance throughout the world. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Zuchi, for this sort of detailed presentation on elections. I'm a political scientist by training, and just learning about election procedure was insightful. I do have a couple of questions, some related to the EVM and some related to the elections. But first of all, I must say that this year's election was probably the hottest election, right? In many ways, hottest in temperature and hottest in blood pressure, if I can say so. But yet, we should congratulate, because most of us, like you rightly said, all is well. And it's all is well is because I don't think there's a single citizen or a political party that is ecstatic with the outcome. We all accept the outcome. We're all okay with the outcome, and I think that is the fairest. So we should just certainly congratulate the soldiers of democracy, which are our election commission officials and all the people that work for it. I think it's a tremendous exercise, and also cast in the light of many elections that have happened, such as in Russia and going to happen in the US. This is certainly a remarkable sort of year for democracy in India. I have a couple of questions, but first I just want some clarificatory questions just based on your presentation. One is a fairly innocuous one, which is about the scheduling of elections. So you said, you have multiple phases. I was very curious, is there a logic by which the phases are decided? I know that you have very limited manpower. So as a clarification, it's a small clarification, but is there a logic by which, the elections are rolled out in which states, and if so, how?
So I mentioned one aspect while discussing the availability of the forces, but there are many other factors. One very important factor is the weather. If you see and analyze the election schedule in 2024 elections, let's not talk about those states where the commission thought there should be 7 phases, as many phases as possible, because we need a lot of forces. That becomes the limiting factor. But in those states where you could conduct with just 1 round, the weather, those states which are going to become very warm, in the later part. For example, Rajasthan. If you remember, Rajasthan were the first and second phase on 19th April and 26th April, Rajasthan were over. Now, Rajasthan reels under heat in May. Suppose if they had conducted elections or kept the poll day in the end of May, you can imagine what would have happened. So this is another factor. But as I had mentioned, the availability of the poll personnel, it is not an issue because every district collector have their own poll personnel and nobody goes out from one place to the other. There are very rare occasions where collector may not, a small district is made and they don't have enough people. So commission says, all right, the neighboring district, you give some people to them. But primarily, it is the law and order. Now, the difference is, suppose if you have, I've just given an example, if you have, say, Karnataka, if you have given 100 companies of CAPF, okay, if you make it one day, then those companies have to be deployed in 50,000 polling stations, right? If you do it in 2 phases, you will be getting 200 companies. That means you can double the presence of the forces. And there is a demand, ladies and gentlemen, from the political parties, especially the opposition. There are times when even the ruling party, people say, please put a lot of CAPF. The demand is put 100% CAPF in all this. So with that particular stipulation, with that requirement, and Election Commission on its own also, they identify critical polling stations. And in critical polling station, they have to put at least 1 or 2 of the requirements. One is this live telecasting, webcasting. Number 2, CAPF. Then there is another concept called micro-observer. He sits inside the polling station to watch that the thing is happening. So these are requirements which are made by the Election Commission. So the factors are the weather, harvest season, festivals. I will give you an instance of festival itself. In these elections, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember, after the polls were announced on 16th March, immediately some parties of Rajasthan came and met the commission. And their contention was, ki, sir, this date that you have put, some date was put initially, everyone will go out because of this festival. So please kindly change the date. And commission was very liberal in considering. Now, since it had come from all the parties together, so for festival, they had to change the date. That is another consideration.
So it's weather and festivals and manpower.
Examinations.
Examinations.
Some state boards have exam in particular months, some state boards. It's a mammoth exercise, I tell you.
Sure. So thank you for that clarification. So it looks like it's more a logistical logic and more than anything else. Thank you for also sort of clarifying the role of EVMs. My question about the EVMs is not related so much to the counting or whether it is sort of, whether there is any way you can, I assume it's a man-made machine, so the skepticism associated with any machine would always remain. My question is more particularly after the votes are counted. So there is this, I've heard about something called totalizers, right? Where you can capture, where you can record the information of who has polled in which booth. And the idea is that these the votes that are counted through these totalizers should be randomized so that you can protect. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I will clarify. So let me tell you, totalizer hasn't come so far. There was a time when totalizer proposal was made under reforms, list of reforms. Now, why totalizer was thought of? If you remember, those people who have voted in earlier elections, in the ballot paper regime, the ballot papers were taken out from the ballot boxes in a particular, and they were within a room, counting room, they were all put in a big basket and they were, sort of shuffled. Now, what is the reason for this shuffling? The reason was that after the elections, some of the candidates will take revenge from those people who have not voted. So when they shuffle all of them, then the candidate who has lost, even the one who has won, will not know who has voted to me or not. Now, then we came to the EVM regime. Then they thought that how can we bring the same regime, same kind of this thing to EVM regime. So totalizer would have done the same thing. But it was not found to be feasible. And now it is not one of those reforms which are being pursued by the Commission for the time being. Though it is still in the list of reforms, but it is too much of a technical thing. The benefit doesn't seem to be as much as because you have to again, in fact, I would like to mention in this, in the context of what you have asked, you see, one of the problems which we have having 66 to 67% voting in the last two Lok Sabha elections. Now, somebody may ask, where are these 33%? Why are they not voting? There are multiple factors. So, one of the factors is that the person who has to vote in his polling station is not in his town. And he's traveling, he's in some other place, he's studying this, that. So, Commission has been brooding over this particular issue, and they came out with remote EVMs. Concept of remote electronic voting machines. Now, that would mean, in very short, that somebody, EVMs will be placed in Bangalore. Those who are in Bombay or Delhi or whatever, they may mention that, oh, I'll be in Bombay and Delhi and that on that day. So, RO, please record my name. I would vote from there. So, the Commission will put remote EVMs there. Now, before anything is introduced of such large scale, Commission has the responsibility to taking it up with the parties. And it took up with the parties at least 6 months before the polls of 2024. The parties said, no, we will not listen to your this thing. We don't have faith in your remote EVMs. First, you address the issues of EVM and then. So what I'm trying to say is that totalizer will also be a very difficult thing to get the approval or maybe consensus of the people. So that is why it has not been taken up so much.
Another sort of contentious issue, I think, which... Oh, you can't, sorry. So another sort of, I think, contentious issue which we mentioned was these electoral bonds. And I think the position essentially is that there was a lot of cash that was being funded through parties, and it was not being disclosed, and electoral bonds would be a way of sort of avoiding this cashless transaction. It's now transparent. It shows up in some financial statements of particular companies. So the debate seems to be whether we should continue keeping it as a cashless regime, or is it better to account for this cash somewhere? I'm wondering what is the, if I'll just finish the question after that.
Sorry.
So having that debate before the elections and now seeing the outcome, right? I mean, how do you reflect on this question?
So electoral bonds were brought in somewhere in 2017. Now, Election Commission has its own reservations about the electoral bonds. That is one. Now, why electoral bonds were finally, discontinued? I mean, Honorable Supreme Court has sat on this particular judgment, so I think they have talked about the opaqueness, lack of transparency, wherein if the voters do not come to know which party has got money from where, then it shows lack of transparency. And I had spoken about transparency a lot. That was the main reason why it was. Now, before electoral bonds came, when I was in Election Commission, we never had these bonds. And we still control the expenditure and we monitor the expenditure. Now, we have gone back to that particular era. And what is that era? Not more than 20,000 cash can be given by any contributor. Any amount which the party is to be given, above 20,000 rupees, has to be in check or through the banks. That regime is continuing. So if there is a political party and they still want, and of course the funding is a part of the process, they can take in checks above 20,000 and less than 20,000 they can take cash. So that continues. So it is not cashless as such. Today also they give checks through banks. Today the cashless economy is all routed through banks. UPI is bank. So that is what my take is, that we haven't got into a system where nothing is available. Sure. We are back into the same regime which happened for almost 60 years.
Another question that I had, which I think, sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah? So, not loud. Okay. Yeah, okay, sure. So, So I just have one last question and then we'll turn it to the audience. And one sort of feature that I think was not there on the presentation, but I'd like you to reflect on, is in the role of political consultants. Political consultants have emerged in big ways, and they do, I think, I don't know what is your opinion, do they sort of skew the battle, skew the game? Are they game changers? But they do get a lot of attention in the press, and I was wondering whether the Election Commission has a certain official position or a reflection on their role? Because that's another way where money, technology, and all have a role to play. I was just curious, is there a sort of response from the Election Commission on political
No,
consultants?
there is nothing that Election Commission has to do with any political consultant, nor it has anything to do with the exit polls. The provision of exit poll is in the law, and so people who want to do exit poll can. I have already spoken about opinion poll. So this is like an opinion. 48 hours before or maybe before the election process starts, if somebody is giving opinion, A will win, B will lose, A will get so many. You keep seeing the latest survey and so many. Political consultants, whatever you name, you're giving the name, they're doing the same thing. And I wouldn't like to go into what kind of relation a political consultant has with the political parties. That is also their personal, prerogative. Anyone can consult anyone for anything. You may have also heard that, during these elections, I used to get a lot of calls. Sir, can you tell who you are going to vote? Surveys, online, on phones. Now, this is very ridiculous. I mean, you don't ask someone before voting that who you're going to vote. Secrecy of voting is our biggest strength, is the strength of elections. So Election Commission has nothing to do with them.
Okay, I've been asked to move it to the audience, so I think there's a mic which will circulate, and we can kindly just introduce yourself by your name, give us a little bit of an introduction, and then ask your question. We'll probably take 2-3 questions at once, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, my name is Shrikant. I work in public policy a little bit. It's a very insightful presentation, and so much tactical information about elections really gives us very confidence. I would just ask you 2 questions where I would want to kind of pull you out from the tactical to a little bit strategic and maybe a 40,000-foot view on the role that you do. Yeah, sure.
Short.
So one is that the Election Commission is not part of the government, and the salary comes from the Consolidated Fund of India, just like the Supreme Court judges. The way the Supreme Court maintains its independence and prevents government influence, what is the EC's challenge to not rise and assert its independence today effectively? And the PM decides the EC, and it's really saddening the way it's moving.
So you have raised a very pertinent point. I'll be very short in my answer. You are absolutely right. In terms of autonomy of Election Commission, I mentioned that more and more autonomy is gradually coming to the Election Commission through judgments. Now, yes, it is one of the demands of the Election Commission to give the budget charged on the budget instead of taking from the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, the thought is that if you are financially dependent on any government, you may not be as independent. They've also demanded for an independent secretariat, which is absolutely independent of, you can recruit your own people. So these are some of the reforms which they have given at least a decade ago. But the redeeming feature is that gradually, one by one, these reforms are being addressed. I hope that even this point will be addressed sooner than later. It's working.
My name is Ashwin. I work in the private sector. I've come back to the country after 22 years, and it's exciting to see what's happening in the elections of this year. Mr. Zucchi, thank you for a very insightful presentation. My question is relating to the role of the DEOs and the CEOs. I was quite intrigued by the fact that they often have day jobs. They go back to being district magistrates after the election is run. And we know that the political parties put them under a lot of pressure. How does one make sure that they stay impartial, given the fact that the elections will finish and they'll go back to their day jobs and be under pressure again?
You have a point in this particular question. And there are occasions when the district magistrates are the DEOs. Generally, the post of DEO is a permanent post. The post of returning officer is not permanent. The returning officer is the person who takes the nominations, who declares the result. That is only from the day of notification till the results are declared. Then RO vanishes. The district magistrate doesn't remain RO. But he remains district election officer for all 365 days because he controls the electoral rolls. An electoral roll updation is a regular process. Got it? But yes, whether they are DO, whether they are RO, both are the same person as DM. Once the model code is over, elections over, there are times when the district magistrates, they take a very strong, stand against someone or maybe for someone. But that stand has to be a level playing field kind of thing. It has to be the correct posture. But the person who has been affected may remember that. And there are instances when they may be posted out immediately after the elections are over. In certain cases, the political parties may even reward a person, who has, under whose leadership they have won the elections. So it acts both ways. But yes, the Commission is quite aware of this, but they can't do anything. Because once the election process is over, it loses control. They can even write to the people that they should not be victimized. They should not be harassed. But they can't say that, don't transfer him from this post. We did try that those DMs who are posted in a particular place, they should not be changed for some time. But it's very difficult because then you will be affecting the federal structure and the powers of the elected government to an extent that election commission will, even when elections are not happening, why should you intervene and look after? So this is a state of affair and things need improvement. And more has to be done on the other side, from the political side. But one thing, if the DMs have not been fair during the elections, and if then they earn the wrath of the political masters, then it is his destiny. Are you getting my point? Yes, whoever.
Thank you, sir, and congratulations on the successful exercise of this year.
Thank you.
My question is about that candidate who was in prison, who was a terrorist, who contested the elections and who won. And he'd been convicted of killing several people. So when he was nominated or when he filed his papers to stand for elections, why was he allowed to stand when he'd already been classified as a terrorist?
Yeah, so this is also a point. If somebody has been imprisoned, he cannot vote, but he can stand in the elections. He can be a candidate. Now, the law also says that unless you are convicted by the court of law and convicted beyond 2 years, you cannot be debarred from contesting. You have seen in case of few leaders in the recent past that, but conviction has to be final. So, if a person has been arrested, whether he may be alleged to be a terrorist or whatever, but he's not been convicted, he's still as a under trial. So he can stand in the elections.
Hello, so my name is Pratyum, and my question is regarding the withdrawal of candidature at the very last moment, which has happened a few places. So, there may be a situation where, the people of the constituency don't have viable options if the candidate withdraws at the very last moment from a political party, and no other candidate can stand from that political party. So, is it not unfair for the people of that constituency? And
So withdrawal is a discretion of the person who has filed the nomination, right? Now, what happens practically? It's not. It's the prerogative of the political parties. Now, what happens is, I'm just presuming a situation that there is a possible candidate of a particular party. So he approaches the president. The president says, "All right, you fill the nomination, to bharo, फिर देखेंगे." Withdrawal, before withdrawal, the candidate has to furnish a certificate from the president of that party or some other general secretary or all, that my candidate is XYZ. And he will get the symbol of that particular party. So that has to be submitted to the RO. Then another candidate comes and says, sir, I want to contest from this. All right, you also file nomination, give us 3-4 days to decide. Withdrawal is still about 7-8 days. So before withdrawal, what happens is the person who had approached earlier, his candidature may be withdrawn by the party itself. They don't give him the certificate. So he keeps waiting for the certificate. The party says no. The second man is given the certificate, so he contests and the first person stands withdrawn. It happened with me when I was SDM in Hanumangarh. We were conducting elections. So there was this gentleman who was a standing, who was already a ex-MLA. So he said, sir, he sat in my office. 3 p.m. on the withdrawal date is the last time till you can submit the certificate. So he came at once, sir, I am getting the certificate. Somebody is coming, somebody is coming, somebody is coming. 3 o'clock, I said, MLA साहब, now 3 o'clock हो गए, अब तो आपका सब क्या करें, आया ही नहीं वहाँ से. So this is one of the reasons. Rest of the reasons I cannot predict what are the issues, why they first file the nomination paper and then withdraw. It could be an internal reason also.
This will have to be the last question. I'm sorry.
Hello, sir. My name is Prem, and I am currently studying at Azim Premji University. So you mentioned about the expenditure limit on a candidate, but I don't think there is a limit on a political party about the expenditure. So in this election, we saw that a political party has in their bank account over thousands of crores, and one party's account got seized by the law or by the government. So is it unfair on that political party whose account got freeze?
Well,
And my second question is...
can I address the first question? Can I address the first question?
It is related to
All right,
first
carry
one.
on.
So in your opinion, there should be a limit on expenditure of political party or not? Thank
Well, see, I'll answer your first question. The law doesn't allow that parties should have any limit, number one. Rather, the Election Commission has been trying to bring a reform that political parties should give their accounts as to how much they have spent. Now, that is still in the process. Number two, this point that you said, should there be limit on the political parties? You see, having a limit on the candidates is primarily to bring a level playing field. You know, there are some parties who don't have enough funds. I won't name them, but they have come to us and said, "Sir, we are those parties who don't have money. We have to compete with it." It's not a level playing field, but that is a fact. Coming to whether the parties should also have limit, you can say on one hand, if you see from a very moral and very ideal kind of condition, you can say ki yes, it brings more level playing field. But it's very difficult. Let me also tell you, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, that accounting for even the candidate's expenditure is an uphill task, is a very big task. And disqualifying an elected MLA is not so easy. The commission has to think many times before deciding, because what expenditure monitoring may have given may not be correct. So it is subjected to challenging in the court also, and that person may come down. But wherever disqualification is required, the commission has to do it. So that would mean that again you will disqualify or deregister a party, and who would keep a check on the party's accounts? So there are issues of implementation. So friends, whenever laws and rules are made, I being a civil servant, and I've done this for 35 years, a good law is one which can be implemented well. Making law is not difficult, but whether that law will be actually followed by the people is the real test of law.
So do we have enough time or we're close? Okay, well, so I'm sorry we have to close. I suppose it's a little after 8. And so thank you again, Mr. Zucchi, for visiting us.
Anyone who has any questions left, I have no, not here. You can collect my email and you can write to me. I will try to see that your curiosity is settled and your question is answered. Is it fine?
Thank you very much.
Once again, on behalf of the Bangalore International Center and Azim Premji University, I'd like to thank Mr. Zuchi and Sri Krishna Iyengar, as well as the rest of the Azim Premji University team, Sudesh Venkatesh, Archana, Akanksha, Ankit, who's their photographer. If you'd like to subscribe to some of the Azim Premji University publications, it's free to subscribe to. They have some material outside, so please do check it out. Thank you and have a lovely week ahead.